Hey, it's Tom here, and today we have a houseplant care video for this plant, which is the yucca. So this is my yucca. Now you might be looking at it thinking, yeah, okay, cool, it looks nice. I hope that's what you're thinking. Maybe it's a couple of years old. It's actually over 10 years old. And you might be thinking, what, Tom? You don't know how to look after this plant. The reason it is so manageable, and that's the word I'm going to use to describe it, is simply because I have kept it in a small container. I have purposely restricted its growth, which I will explain why as we go through the video. By this point in time, after 10 years, it should be significantly larger than it is, but I didn't want it to get that big. Again, I will explain why. However, you can grow them to a really big size, and you've probably seen them in shops, and there's all kinds of business we're going to cover in shortly. But yeah, this is mine. And it doesn't look its best. I get that. I have purposely left on some of the yellowing leaves to explain why that you get them in the first place. I wanted to illustrate everything about the plant, why it doesn't always look good and what you can do and why it does certain things. I don't want to just show you a perfect plant because that's just not how you really grow houseplants in the long term. They don't look perfect all the time. So this is a plan before I've pruned it up a little bit. Anyway, let's get going. Okay, so let's talk about the care requirements. What does it want? Light. Okay, so this is a plant that will cope with, not just cope with, it actually wants full sun. It wants as much light as possible. Stick it in your south-facing window. It wants it. It wants as much light as possible, and that's what it loves, okay? Yes. Now, if you can't provide full sun, or you don't want it right in the window, it's okay. It can cope with a bit of shade. It's not ideal. It's not its first choice, but it will put up with a little bit of lower light. Not low light. Don't read it as low light. Just a little bit less, a few feet away maybe from a window. This one in particular is in a southeast facing window, and it's fine. I wouldn't want to go north facing. It might cope with that for a little while, maybe a year or two, but it's not ideal. It wants as much light as possible. So try and find somewhere in your home that's really bright, because that's what it's looking for. So talking about watering, it's not a succulent. I don't think it's a succulent. I'm pretty sure it's not. But it does have succulent-like qualities. It will deal with underwatering really well. So it can cope for weeks with no water. It's very, very tolerant. It does not like to be overwatered. That's its weakness here. So too much water will cause problems. So when in doubt, water less. As for how often you should do it, the general rule for these plants is water it well, and then don't water it again until either it has completely dried out, the potting mix is completely dry, or it's almost there, literally. It's imminently dried out. It does not need to be kept constantly moist. So a period of drying is what it's looking for. It's kind of that balance. It's just kind of meeting that kind of period. It's tolerant. There's a big scale where you can pick where you decide to water it, but somewhere on that scale is what you want to be going for. So avoid the excessive amounts of water, lots of moisture, keep away from that. But equally, don't let it be dry for really long periods. It doesn't want that. It will cope with it. It would be tolerant of that. But for a healthy plant, you do need to water it, like I say, when it dries out. Water it again. Okay, so let's look at repotting and potting mix. All right. So potting mix, let's do that first because that's simple. Just a normal everyday houseplant-based potting mix is fine here. They do not need any particularly strong amendments. They're very, very, very easygoing houseplants in that regard. Just a normal, anything that's like that is fine. You can amend things if you would want to do so. If you want to add a bit of sand or grit or perlite, that's fine. They're fine with that too. They don't want anything particularly free draining, or rather, it's not they don't want it, they don't need it, is what I should say. The roots they're quite thick. I might take this out of its container and you can have a look, but they're adaptable, okay? So normal potter mix is probably absolutely fine to use here. If you want to use something more fancy, go for it. But they don't need it, is what I'm trying to say. In terms of repotting, okay, so this one has been picked for indoor cultivation because it does not have the same problems as the outdoor one, but it does have traits, okay? So there is still points, there is still things, so you need to be careful. And that is the fundamental reason why I did not want it to grow large. My home isn't particularly massive. I don't have an area in my home where this could be out of the way, on the ground, growing taller, where I wouldn't brush past it. I don't want to do that. I don't want to brush past this plant. So instead, it's been relegated to a windowsill, and it's been kept purposely in a small container to keep it compact and not growing as fast as it would have done if the pot was larger. If you don't want your plant to grow too big like me and you want to keep it manageable, I'm going to keep using that word instead of small. If you want it to be manageable, then you don't need to repot. Like I think I mentioned it. If not, I'm going to tell you now, I have not repotted this plant for over 5 years, okay? I really should. It is full. I'm pretty sure. Yep, the roots are out the bottom and the pot is warped and it is so tight in here. I don't know if you can even see this, but yeah, it needs to be repotted. And I'm going to do it. I am going to repot it, okay? I don't really want to because of all the reasons I've already explained, but I really should do because otherwise, this plant's been struggling for so long. And this just goes to show how hardy and tough they actually are because it has coped for 5 years in a container that's probably way too small for it. So it's done well. They're good. They're forgiven plants. In terms of how often you want to do it, it's going to depend. So like I said, if you want it manageable, if you want it contained, you can go for quite a long period of time. If you want it to grow, if you want it to go fast, if you want it to grow tall, if you want a really substantial looking yucca, then you're going to have to repot it more often. We're probably talking maybe every 2 years or so. The roots are quite thick and it will fill the container relatively fast. There probably isn't anywhere in your home which is too cold for these plants, okay? I've seen them in conservatories and sunrooms which are unheated over winter months. Fine. Just, you've got to keep it away from anywhere that is below freezing, basically. As soon as you head to freezing, you are in danger zone. So for most people, that's going to be if you've left your plants outdoors during summer. So just remember to bring it in before winter really sets in. In terms of upper temperatures, so heat, they love it. They want it to be warm, they're used to, and they are adapted to very warm temperatures. So yeah, there probably isn't anywhere in your home which is too hot for these plants. I say that and there probably will be, but for most people, these plants are really tolerant of very warm temperatures, so you should be absolutely fine. So ideal growing conditions, if a normal room that you are comfortable in, this plant is going to be happy as well. That's what you should be going for. Humidity is not really a problem here either, so unless you have an extreme level of humidity one way or the other, you're not going to need to be concerned. You may get brown tips and brown leaves if the humidity level is particularly low, but it's just not that common, fortunately. You're much more likely to get brown tips, in my opinion, from a watering mistake rather than the humidity problems. But it's possible, obviously. If you know that you live in a really low humidity home, then you may have these as a side effects. So that's something to be aware of. In terms of feeding, yes. So in the growing season, so when they are actively growing, they do need some feed. The leaves are quite thick. They're a little bit more substantial than what a normal houseplant might produce. They do need a bit of feed. So you are looking to feed them possibly once a month, maybe a little bit more frequently, but you don't need to overdo it. They don't need a really strong feed, basically. So just a normal fertilizer. Houseplant marketed fertilizer is probably absolutely fine. Yeah, once a month. I do mine maybe once every 2 months, around that sort of period. I possibly should do it a little bit more because the container is so small, okay? So there's very, very little nutrients in this pot. And the only nutrients it gets is from me giving it fertilizer. So I probably should provide more than I do. And that would explain why some of the leaves are a little bit discolored. They look a little bit yellow. They don't look as green as they should do. And that's down to, in my view, down to not enough feed. So they're a little bit, they could do a little bit more. So I'm going to feed my plant after I finish filming this video because I think I've been a bit naughty looking after it sometimes. So yeah, I need to give it a bit more feed. So once a month, maybe once every 2, just a normal everyday houseplant feed is fine. So let's talk about speed of growth and let's cover a problem as well, which is yellow leaves. All right, okay, so, now I have an article on my website about this houseplant and there's a comment section at the bottom and I get a lot of comments from people concerned because they notice there's new growth at the top, some new leaves are coming out and they're really excited, and then they notice some of the lower leaves are going yellow. Now wondering what's going on. Now, these sort of plants are classed as false palms, which essentially just means that the stems get taller and taller and taller, but it doesn't end up with more leaves overall, which is really weird because most houseplants will grow and they would just keep producing more leaves and they get bigger. They will physically grow in size. The yucca does not do that. It will get taller and the stems will get longer, but the amount of leaves don't increase. And every time you might get 3 or 4 new leaves, 3 or 4 old leaves will go yellow and hang down. And it's always the oldest ones, okay? So it's always the ones at the bottom. Well, it should be always the ones at the bottom. And what will happen is they'll go yellow exactly like this one here, which is the lowest leaf left on this stem. And you can just pull it off, okay? Normally. Sometimes, I don't know, is it going to come? Yes, they just come off. Done. That's normal. That's what happens, okay? And that's just a sign, essentially, of a healthy plant, because it's getting rid of the old leaves and the new ones are regrowing, so it's good. But it's not a particularly fast-growing plant. It doesn't grow at a super fast pace, even if you provide ideal growing conditions. And what you'll find is it will grow at certain times of the year, and then it will sort of stop. Again, normal. If you can provide warmth and really good light all year round, you might get a reasonable level of growth, possibly all year round. But for most people, you're not going to get that. You're going to get seasonal spells of growth, and that's normal. So yeah, I think that covers that. And it covers the yellow leaves too. Another reason you might get yellow leaves, but you won't just get it on the lower leaves, you'll get it at random leaves as well, which will be overwatering. And you will also possibly notice the dreaded mushy stems, and if you have that, you have a serious problem. You've probably got root rot, and it's probably the end of your plant. So if you take anything away from this video, just bear in mind about watering, okay? Don't overdo it. It's the #1 reason that people will lose their yucca over watering. Avoid it. I hope that if you do grow yours, you have some good positive stories to tell, and let me know in the comments. Please do. I like hearing from you, and I like hearing how you have grown yours. Tell me any tips you might have. I'm always looking out for more information. And that's it. So thanks for watching my video today, and thank you for your time, and I will catch you in the next one.